This episode of Brains on Games, we'll talk about 11, a board game about managing a professional soccer team. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, I'm super excited to talk about 11 from Portal Games, which is a game that's still delivering to backers, I think, but it should be hitting retail before too long. So I'm going to review the final version, the deluxe version of the game that I received. We'll talk about the first impressions of that one, because this is a very complex game that I'm just kind of starting to scratch the surface of, I feel like, even after multiple plays. Now, 11, here's the box for this thing. 11 is a game for 1 to 4 players. There's solo rules and there's different scenarios when you play on your own, but you can play with up to 4 people. It works with kids age 14 and up, and like I said, it is a complicated game, and you can play a game in 1 to 2 hours, though when you're first starting, it will probably take longer than that. Let's take a deeper look at 11. 11 is a complex, heavy game where you are trying to win by earning the most victory points at the end of a 6-week season. Now, there are variations in the rules. There are different ways that you can play. You could play a longer season with the winter break. There's lots of ways to play this game, but primarily with the base rules, you're going to play a 6-week season. You're trying to have the most victory points at the end of that. You earn those points through your position on the leaderboard among all the other teams in the league. You'll earn points by upgrading your stadium, by training youngsters and having them play in your game, by collecting staff. There are lots of ways to earn points in this game, so you're not only focused on the leaderboard, but the leaderboard does earn you lots of points if you're near the top, and if you're near the bottom, you're going to lose some points because you're going to be relegated. I'm not going to go through in detail about all of the aspects of this game and how to play it, because I looked at some how to play videos and they're an hour long. So like I said, it's complicated and there are multiple ways that you can play it. There are expansions that add additional, but everything is modular. So I'm going to talk more about the basic game, which is how I played it as I learned through this thing. And I'll show you some of the parts as we go along. There's probably going to be lots of photos that I'm going to have to bring in because this game is a table hog. I've got a large 6x4 foot gaming table, and when we played with 3 players, it took up the entire thing. So it is a big game, and we'll look at some pieces of it here on my little camera as we go through. It's an economic sim. You're building an engine that's going to earn you these 4 different resources. Of course, you want to earn some money. There are fans. You're a soccer club. You need to have fans. There are operations. That's a resource that you can spend to get extra actions. And then finally, there's the fitness stat where that's what's going to allow your players often to use some ability during the game, but even to play in a game at the end of the week. You've got a board of directors. The first thing you're going to do is have a directors meeting where some problem is going to come up that you're going to have to solve. And that's on Monday every week. And then this little wooden chip is going to move through the week to show you your progress through each round of the game. So the round of the game lasts a week, and it's going to finish on the weekend with match day. This was honestly one of the hardest things we found about the game, was remembering to move this little chip to keep track of how many actions we had taken. That's our issue. That might be unique to the players who are playing in this case. I haven't moved anything in the engine here based on the directors, but at the beginning of the game, you're going to draft your 3 directors, and that's going to influence which resources you're going to produce at the start of every week. So it's an engine building game. You're going to be spending your resources, money primarily, but fitness as well. You're going to be spending resources and building an engine. You'll be buying upgrades, like anything you can think of that you would need to do in a professional soccer club is included in this game. Players can be injured, players can be suspended. There's all kinds of things that can happen here. You're hiring staff, you're upgrading your stadium, you're building up a fan base, and you're hiring players, selling players. There's all kinds of things you can do. With the more advanced rules, you can bet on games. You can transfer players to other clubs. There's a marketplace where players in different positions are going to have varying values. So There's a lot of things you can do, and you might feel like you know how to manage a soccer club after playing this game. Like I said, I haven't set everything up. I just wanted to show you some of the pieces here. You've got this dual layer player board on the resource thing, and you're going to be moving these things around so that at the beginning of the turn, this player is going to get €3 and 3 fan tokens and 2 operations and 2 fitness. And it is kind of a storytelling game. So when you do that board meeting, what's going to happen is you're going to draw one of these cards, which is you're drawing this at random, and there's some event that's happening to your team. In this case, you've recognized that the gym is too old and you might need to upgrade it. So your board of directors is going to decide, are they going to spend money on a new gym, which will decrease their money but increase the player's fitness? Or are they going to do nothing at all? So you're going to roll a die at the beginning of the game, and that's going to determine how the board of directors votes. But if you don't like that, if the fans don't like it, you can spend a fan token in order to re-roll that die. So there's some randomness, but even those random events are kind of telling the story of your club. So normally in this game, the match day and the board meeting day are things that all the players would do simultaneously. But we found when we played, we're still getting used to all of the cards. We wanted to hear the story, like what's happening with your club? What are the things that you're rolling on? What are the things, how did your directors vote? We wanted to know about that. We were interested enough in the games on match day that we wanted to see how things played out rather than just everybody doing their own thing in their own corner of the game. In terms of your stadium, these are very well designed boards. You can add in this dual layer board some extra stands so that more fans can come to the game. You can increase your fan base by putting stadium lighting in. So there, as you're upgrading your stadium, it's going to give you some kind of bonus in addition to some victory points for the end of the game. One of the things that we like best about the stadium boards is just the way they've set things up for sponsors. So one of the things you can do in this game is hire sponsors, and you might just give them a shout out and earn some instant cash and discard the sponsor cards. But you might put an ad board in your stadium where if you want the Dice Tower to sponsor your team and you want to put their logo on your board, you're going to earn some ongoing cash for that advertising. And then you've got the little Dice Tower logo that's poking out from under your ad board. So that's the picture that's going to show up on the walls of your stadium. Maybe you want a jersey sponsor, and that's going to give you a different bonus, but you can only have one of these. So Rodney from Watch It Played maybe would be excited to see that some players are being sponsored by his channel on YouTube. So you're putting different things here in the board. You've got a limited amount of space, so you can't have everything. And those are all going to earn you some cash and potentially some victory points at the end of the game. There are hidden objectives that you're going to be working on, and those tell a little story about your team, and you might earn some extra victory points. In my case, the last hidden objective I played was one where we didn't want to be beholden to sponsors. So if I could make it to the 3rd week and only have one sponsor on my board, so no t-shirt or maybe only the t-shirt and no ad boards, then I would earn a few victory points for that. So there are secret objectives and they tell the story, and you're buying these, contracting these sponsors to earn you some cash as you go along. So we really like the way this board was laid out, just because you're sliding logos in and now you know what your team's jersey is going to look like. Not only are you going to have some sponsors, but underneath that resource board, the director board, you might be hiring staff, and some of the staff are quite hilarious. You can get trainers who can improve the stats of your players on your team. You can have tacticians who will allow you to be more flexible in terms of the tactics you can use on match day. You could have a doctor who's going to heal injured players more easily. So there's all kinds of things you can do, and you can spend some extra operations token in order to use those actions. This one is a bit of a gamble. They don't know who this guy is, but he's the ultra fan, so he's going to have potentially some impact on the game or on your game if you take his action. So they're very thematic. I think the final staff I hired in the last game that I played yesterday was a dog named Lady, who is kind of the mascot of the team, and she prevented my fan resource from going below 3. Now, even though I would love for Rodney Smith at Watch It Played to sponsor my soccer club, one of my favorite sponsors was Budget Shrinks. So these psychologists are going to allow you to increase some of your stats. These are the team therapists who are going to help your team out throughout the game. The meat, though, of this game, what you're working towards here, I say the meat, but really all the other things leading up to this is really, but you're leading up to match day at the end of every round, because you will get lots of bonus points if you're able to be at the top of the table at the end. So through the game, you're going to be hiring players and maybe selling players to earn some cash if you need to, and you're going to be playing against, there's 6 rounds, so you're going to have 6 of these cards on the side. This is the opponent stack of cards. Now, I just grabbed a whole bunch of them and put them here. I haven't shuffled them up or anything, but you're going to have 6 cards. You can play in 3 different divisions. We picked 3rd division because that was the easiest one. We were still learning the game, and I have no idea how you would ever win a game against 1st division teams, because even the 3rd division teams were tough for us. So you're going to start with 3 weaker teams, and then underneath that, you've got 3 random teams that are a little bit stronger, but they're all sort of 3rd division, 2nd division, 1st division, and you're deciding which division you're going to play in. All the players have to agree on that. So you know at the beginning of the week a little bit about the team you're going to be playing against at the end of the week, because you'll see the scouting report on the back of their card, and you know what kind of formation they use when they play the game. So you might be saying to yourself, oh, here's a team the scouting report says they're strong in the midfield. I need to get some midfielders here. And the players have little icons indicating where they're going to play when you hire them. You're going to have a veteran player on your squad at the beginning and a youngster. And the youth players are neat because they don't have a face or a number, but once you train them, you kind of get a surprise. You don't know what sort of power they're going to have when you hire them at the beginning. But then I was lucky enough in my game to have a director who allowed me to begin with 1 extra stand for lots of fans. And I was lucky enough to have a staff member a security guard who could allow more fans to fit into those stands. And then I had a youngster when I promoted him who could score an extra goal if he was playing to a sold out stadium. So the fans really motivated that youth in order to score a goal at the end. So that was a great little engine I had going. I had lots of fans coming in. I was making money from my fans. If I placed enough fans in the stands, I would have a player who could score a goal. So it was a neat little combination that I was able to get going. In this case, you're not going to have that combination, but you can hire a goalie. He's not represented by a jersey, but you've got numbered jerseys. You've got players who are going to be the ones who try to get involved in plays to score goals, or players that are trying to block the others from scoring goals. So you'll have a shield or a ball. And then once game day comes around, you'll put your fans in the stands, and then you're going to have some of these tactic cards. If you manage to hire staff members who can earn you extra tactics cards, then you'll be super flexible in your formation. So in this case, I just have a basic formation, and I decided, well, these guys are playing 4-4-2, so probably if I play 4-4-2, that would be a good idea. I didn't even look closely at the scouting report here. I just adjusted things on the fly. You also get to decide which of the players that you've hired are going to play, because they need to be fit in order to play. So you're going to be putting these little fitness icons on them and decide, oh, I want to play those guys. This guy's going on the bench. I'm not going to play him. But if you're lucky enough to have enough of these little icons, then you can play all of the players, in this case, that I've hired, if you've earned enough of these fitness tokens. So you can do that through your staff members. Maybe you're putting a gym in the stadium so that your players can remain fit. Maybe you'll get lucky enough to build a new gym and your money will go down, but your fitness will go up. These fitness things are very important if you want to get anywhere on the leaderboard. Once you've decided which of your players are going to play in the game and you've figured out your formation, this is something that was really quite fiddly. We would spend some time looking at the scouting report and looking at the formation and examining our players and their abilities and shuffling things around to kind of figure out, well, how am I going to have the best chance to win this game? Sometimes you might have a player on the wing and only one here in the center trying to shoot on the net. So it was quite a strategic kind of spatial puzzle with some randomness because you don't know how this team is going to play until you flip over their card. Then you see where all of their players are and what their strength is, how good their goalie is, and then you're going to go through each section of the board and figure out who scores, moving these little counters on the scoreboard as you go. Then at the end, if you're lucky enough to have the player like I did who gives you an extra goal, that will work out quite well. Some of the tactics cards will give you an extra bonus. I had one where if there was a team that was ahead of me on the leaderboard, I could score an extra goal if I played that formation. So it really does help if you know something about soccer. You understand those formations and you can move these players around the board that has turf on it. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but there's a felt coating on this thing, which makes these pieces slide around quite nicely, but it feels like a soccer pitch when you're moving these things around. So then you're going to either win or lose or draw, and then you determine the consequences of the match by rolling this die. Now, you roll a die at the beginning to determine how your board is going to vote in the board meeting, and then you roll a die at the end of every week, at the end of the game, to figure out what the consequences are for the match. If you win, you might get more fans. You might be able to train one of your players. You might get some temporary strength from that. But if you roll this die and you get a low number, something bad is going to happen. You might have to roll the 12-sided die because one of your players is injured because they worked so hard in the game. And there are worse consequences and fewer bonuses if you've lost than if you've won. There's no way to mitigate or re-roll this die, at least in the basic rules. So the consequences of the game are completely random. And unfortunately, didn't feel that random when we were playing. I think I rolled in the first 4 games. I won the first 4 games, and I rolled a 1 each time. Now, what are the odds of that? I rolled a 1 each time, so my players were constantly being injured. I mean, thank goodness I had a doctor who could make sure that they were ready to play in a later game, but I really had a tough time rolling anything good on that die. Finally, at the end, I got a draw, and I managed to train one of my players when I rolled a 6, but my die rolls were not cooperating. Once you've figured out, each player has figured out whether they won against the team that they're playing against, there are going to be some other teams on the leaderboard, and their stats are determined, their win and loss and draw rate are determined randomly. You've got, look at this, you've got a dice tray that looks like a soccer pitch, and so there are some teams that are red, and you roll a red die for those teams to determine where they're going to go. The red teams are tough. There are 3 number 3s on here. Of course, you get 3 points if you win a game. You get 1 point if you draw. The blue teams are kind of in the middle. They've only got, I think, 2 number 3s on their game, and then we've got the weakest teams only have a 1 and often 1 number 3, and often they'll lose or draw in their games. So you're rolling for each other team. There are 8 additional teams besides the players, or maybe it works out to 8. I think it was 8. I don't remember off the top of my head, but in the game that we played last, I think there were 8 because there were some doubles in the 6-card decks of opponents that we were playing against. So it is so thematic, this game, in terms of what you're doing, and it really does feel like managing a soccer squad. Now, another thing that happens, once you've done everything, you've figured out the leaderboard, you know where you are on the table and where all the other teams are, and maybe you're starting to think about what you're going to do next week because you've discarded this card, well, then you have to pay for your club, and your maintenance costs are higher depending on how many staff you have, how many infrastructure upgrades you've done to your stadium, how many players you have on your team. It costs more and more and more. Luckily, you do earn some money by putting fans in the stands. You trade those little wooden fan tokens to get some coins, and that can help to pay for the upkeep of your squad. So what skills are you practicing and developing when you're playing a game like 11? This is a complex game where you're planning ahead to the end of the week to match day, where you're planning ahead to, what's going to happen in the next week with the game that I'm going to play. You're budgeting those resources. You have a limited number of actions. And when you're planning and budgeting and working efficiently, we are talking about executive functioning skills. There is a lot going on here in terms of thinking and planning ahead. And there's so many different elements of the game that, like I said, do work together well enough that once you've played a few rounds, it's almost second nature. You don't have to refer to the rule book too much. But there is a lot happening here that you have to juggle. And, working memory is one of those executive functions where you're working with information in memory. So you are practicing a lot of that. Now, you do have to, another executive functioning skill, sustained focus and attention. This is a longer game. And if you've got a teenager who's kind of enthusiastic about soccer and the theme is something that they would like, you've got these tactile pieces that kind of engage the senses. You've got the strategic element and the mini game of playing the match at the end. There's a lot to, I think, draw you in, but at the same time, you are thinking ahead and planning ahead, and you might be sort of sitting quietly and trying to stay focused on what you're doing and keep your eyes on the prize, stay focused on whatever your goal might be. So it certainly exercises that sustained attention muscle too. At the end, when you're playing the matches, you are doing some spatial problem solving. There is some visual spatial reasoning here because you know the opposite team's formation, but you don't know exactly where on the pitch those players are going to be. You don't necessarily know how strong their attackers are. You do get some information though, and then you're thinking, okay, with probability, where's the best place for me to put my defenders? Where's the best place should I have more folks in the middle and fewer on the wings? So there is a spatial problem solving component. There might be some, it doesn't really teach you how to be a manager of a soccer squad, but it might, spark some curiosity about that job and about professional soccer. I know that my son was excited to come over and play this because it came in, a few weeks after the World Cup was just played, and he's a university student now who used to play soccer all the time, and the World Cup really brought him back into wanting to play soccer again and wanting to watch soccer again. So he signed up for an adult team, and he's working out to get fit again. And he was excited to see this game, and because he's coached, because he knows about managing teams, because we're Liverpool supporters in our house, so we're excited about what Jurgen Klopp does, sometimes disappointed maybe, but we love Liverpool, so we've supported them for years since Klopp moved over from Dortmund. So we are a soccer family, and this was really exciting for him and for us. And it might, if you've got a teenager who's interested in that kind of thing, might get them thinking about playing soccer or about coaching or what have you, learning more about that as a job. Final thoughts about 11. Well, this is a game that I can't say that these are final thoughts because I played it several times, but I was teaching new people each time, and I don't really feel like there's so much going on here. This is a complex strategic game with so many extra advanced rules that could be added in that I haven't even looked deeply at yet, other than reading about all the different things I can do. I've got 3 expansions on the shelf about improving your stadium and playing an international cup tournament, and they're hiring international players, and there's little plane tokens that you're going to. Anyway, there's so much going on here. This is a complex economic engine builder that really, I think, does a good job of simulating that management. That management of a soccer squad. And there's a lot going on, but like I said earlier, you will find yourself after playing a few rounds, the actions and what they do and their outcomes become more second nature. The most challenging and fiddly part, I would say, is still the matches. It's a bit of a brain burner, a bit of a puzzle in figuring out how you're going to place your players once you've hired them, and also making sure you have enough of those fitness tokens so that you can play the players on your squad. There are multiple ways that you can win. You don't have to be at the top of the leaderboard, but you sure don't want to be at the bottom because you'll lose points in that case. Maybe if you're focusing on upgrading your stadium, you'll be able to get enough points to be at least close to winning. And that's sort of what happened in the last game that we played. My friend, unfortunately, was near the bottom of the leaderboard and he lost some points, but he had lots of points from his stadium infrastructure and from collecting staff. So he had worked hard on the behind the scenes side, but he wasn't as fortunate in his games as I was because I had lucked out enough. I had those fans who were bringing money in, so I didn't need to do as much with the sponsorships as he did. So there's multiple ways to play. I think I was second. I wasn't at the top of the leaderboard, but it was really based on a die roll. Unfortunately, the team that was closest to me was one of the red ones, so it was a 50-50 chance. If they rolled a 3, I was going to come in second place, but I could have been first and had 5 extra points if it weren't for that. So there's some, like I said earlier, there's some randomness, but I knew what was coming because the randomness other than the match consequences is a sort of limited a little bit. It's a super thematic game. It's got beautiful components. I mean, you've seen them. I didn't even show you the first player token, which is a referee's whistle. It's got beautiful pieces, at least in the deluxe version. We played with the playmat, and I probably have put up, I haven't planned it all out yet, but I probably put up a picture or two of what that playmat looks like, which, you know, if you've watched very many of these videos, you know I like a playmat. If cards need to be organized on a grid, and they do in this game, I like to have a playmat to keep those things straight. But the components are beautiful and tactile, and it's super thematic. And the way the mechanisms work together, it is really telling a story, which I really like, the story of your team. You've got that secret goal that you're working towards, and you've got directors that are kind of giving you an idea of the philosophy, you might say, of your team. You might hire a player who, one of the players I hired was hot-tempered, and if I hired him, then that was going to make one of the staff angry, and one of the trainers wouldn't be available to train that week. So it's just, it's so interesting. And we, like I think I said at the beginning, the first turn, the Monday board meeting, and the match day are meant to be played simultaneously, everybody doing their own thing, but we've just found it so interesting. What's the story? Read the flavor text on your board meeting thing. I want to hear what's happening with your team. I had one instance where there was a sneaker club who wanted our players to use their boots, but the players wanted to do their own sponsorship. So the players would be mad, but I would earn some more money, and the board was voting. Anyway, it's very thematic, and I love that there's a little story each week about what's happening with your squad, and then that story might carry forward as you're hiring different kinds of staff to do different things through the game. Now, are there downsides to 11? Well, even in the few plays that I've had where, like I said, I was focused on learning the basic game. Well, I think, number one, if you're not enthusiastic about soccer, you're going to sort of lose the thread when it comes to match day. If you like economic sims, everything leading up to match day might make a lot of sense to you, but then you get to match day and formations and midfielders and defenders, and, that might not make a lot of sense. This game is a table hog. It is huge. It took up, like I said, my entire table. So it is really big, but with those great components, it's also a draw. If you were playing this in public at a great big table, people would be coming to see what you're doing because it is a beautiful game about the beautiful game. And it's complex. Now, like I said, the mechanisms do mesh together well, and it all makes sense because it's so thematic. Everything makes sense, and once you've played through it a few times, you're going to get it. But I think it's a game that will be intimidating to some players if they're not familiar with these kinds of economic games. If they're not players of more advanced board games, they might feel a bit uncomfortable or uncertain about what to do. And even when we were learning it in the first couple of games I played with new players, you might not know, like, what's the ultimate strategy. We were having fun playing it anyway, but I was playing with people who knew about soccer and were enthusiastic about soccer. I think for us, with the modular rules and the fact that everything integrates together so well, that even though there can be a bit of a learning curve, it's not as steep as it might look. And this was a real winner in our house. It's one that's going to be sitting on the table, ready to be played. It does take a lot of time to set up because there's so many decks of cards. They didn't give me enough baggies. I need more Ziploc bags to keep everything separated to make it easier. But the theme is a winner for us. The components are so amazing. Everyone who played it said they just couldn't believe you could touch, the felt on that player board. You hear me rubbing against the player board that's sitting here beside me. It's a game that I want to discover more about. I'm looking forward to adding some, not all at the same time, but some of those expansions, and betting on games. How is that going to affect things? Like I'm just excited about playing 11 again. So I think that Portal Games has really come up with something special, and we really loved it. So there are a few, like this is a first printing, so there are a few things that maybe were a bit confusing. So I know they've got on Board Game Geek, there's a frequently asked questions document that's being edited and evaluated by the game designers. So that's a good thing. It's one where there were a few grammatical errors on some of the cards and a spelling error that we noticed. Someone was a chef instead of a chief, but this is a fantastic game. So I think that Portal Games has knocked this one out of the park, at least for us, and I'm looking forward to playing it again. If you have any questions about 11 or comments or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments section below the video, or of course you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.